Today is August 20th, 2015. Sarah Battison and Kay Wagner meet today with Dr. A.C.V. Elston, a retired pediatric cardiologist. Dr. Elston worked 33 years for Gunderson Health System and served as the chair of the research committee during his tenure. Dr. Elston, why did you choose Gunderson?
Because I lived in Baltimore. The chief of pediatrics at Johns Hopkins called me into his office and said, "Elston, I'm going to offer you a professorship right here in this prestigious institution." And I went home, and later that afternoon, Dr. Bob Rasmus called me up from La Crosse. Said, "Why don't you come out and work with us?" I jumped at the chance. That's why I'm in La Crosse. Such a warm and welcoming man. Such an unpleasant place to live in Baltimore. It was easy. I've been here ever since. It was a wonderful institution. I had known it previously, and it had academic aspects, practice aspects that were very appealing.
Do you have a fondest memory?
Peter Niwala. Peter Niwala was an invention of Dr. Steve Copps and myself. And we would admit a more or less make-believe patient with that name and complete record, with a pumpkin head, sheets, darkened room, and then persuade all of the new staff who had not met Peter before to come and be consultants and have fun with them. That was my favorite. I'm very cautious about exposure of children to public view, and it made me uneasy to, for example, name a patient who was a child at the time, and we hope still surviving. So I have some unusual feeling for the exposure of children to things that they do not have control over. The pumpkin, however, was great fun. Pretty harmless.
I imagine it took a lot of people by surprise.
Well, we built them up to the point that they were anxious and uneasy about meeting this very strange patient, and they often had to be gloved and gowned and in a darkened room, and so they were kind of worked up about it. It was very fun. We'd just have people in stitches after they came out.
What was the basis for your interest in research? That was a big part of...
Yes, it was part of my life. I had a mainline science degree as a medical preamble, but had enough biologic courses to qualify for medical school entry. I had a degree in applied math and physics. And at that time, the medical school took 3 other young folks who had degrees in something other than traditional pre-med, a pharmacist, a businessman, and myself, to see if they would fit in. So I had had the discipline of hard sciences all my life, and learned that through my various fellowships and tried to do it in my own practice. But then I thought it would be fun to expand that and bring it to our institution here. And I had been an early part of the research committee and later director. So that's the background for my interest, at least.
Did the Gunderson Medical Journal come out of the research committee?
Oh, yes, it did. As a matter of fact, that was one of our targets, to do a refereed publication on a regular basis. It was slow starting in the beginning, but that was one of the products.
Who was your role model?
My personal role model was a family physician in a small town in Wisconsin who inspired me, and we knew him as a friend and a family friend. So that got me thinking about medicine even while I was off studying all the science stuff.
What was it about this particular person that appealed to you as a role model?
Oh, he was a charmer. He was a brilliant man, a reader, sort of a Renaissance man, and as well as a personal physician. I didn't have any unusual medical problems for which I'd had to see him, but I had often met him in family gatherings, and we'd had conversations about his learning the process of qualifying for medicine, and he was a very good friend.
How has the field of pediatric cardiology changed since the time that you began your practice?
Well, of course, it's changed tremendously. One of my teachers was Dr. Tausig, Helen Tausig, a world-famous children's heart doc at Johns Hopkins, and she kind of started it all. She trained all the departmental heads in the world, basically, in the medical part of children's cardiology. And by the time I got here, I thought I was well prepared, but everything was new every year. Ultrasound made a tremendous change in the practice of cardiology, in pediatric cardiology at least, because it permitted us to actually see internal heart parts and compartments for the first time. That was wonderful. It was right in the middle of it. Technical, interesting.
Mm-hmm. What would you like to be known for?
Having never grown up. I had a lot of fun with kids, and sometimes I still do unusual animal sounds and entertain my grandchildren and perhaps other children when I go shopping at festival food. I don't have any aspirations to be known as a famous researcher. I like books, I like people, I like kids, I have a good time. And if you've ever put children in a sandbox, they always make motor noises and animal noises. It's a natural, and so I'm still doing it.
Do you have a patient that stands out in your career?
Well, Peter Niwala, that's him.
Anything else that you'd like to share?
Well, I had a wonderful time here. I had wonderful people to work with, and retired happy and had a good time. And it was, I think, fun. I enjoyed every professional contact. I loved the kids. The clinic was good to me to permit me to do this work.
What interested you in the field of pediatrics?
Joe Teeth. I met Joe Teeth at the University of Wisconsin, where he was a photographer in the pathology department. And then I later, eventually, came here. And Joe and I made a picture of a small child long ago who had a very unusual problem, for which I think Joe won a photographer's prize. And so that got me interested in the children. And those children's this and children's that and children's hearts ever after.
Mm-hmm.
Reflecting on persons who are aging and you want to get their oral histories before they are unable. I had the pleasure of, she was lame and lived alone, and I'd go visit with her, and we had a wonderful time together. We would parse words with enough Greek, Latin, and French, and Spanish, and she was a classic scholar. We'd invent words and take them apart, recreate them. She knew a little Sanskrit too, and so we'd go to roots and stems and that came from Sanskrit, such as sto, which in Sanskrit means stop, and you can see how that has come to modern other languages. Well, I enjoyed my mother. Now, the question, who was your favorite patient? You asked the question.
Who was your favorite patient?
Oh, it was Peter Niwala. That's Halloween spelled backward. And he was from Nickmup, Iowa. Pumpkin spelled backwards. And we had the best time making up an authentic patient record with very detailed notes for this fictional patient who was made up in a dark room with a pumpkin for a head and a stuffed pillow or two for a body. And we would invite young doctors who were new to the staff, who had never had experience with this strange condition of, it was called pre-pie disease. And we had to get their medical opinions about how to deal with it. We had a good time. And many of the non-medical staff were invited as well to give their various opinions and reflections on how to deal with Mr. Niwala.
And did that come to a halt at some point in time?
Well, I'm sad to say it did, because administratively, people thought we were having too much fun. And so they said, stop. And we had to quit admitting him by ambulance and by helicopter.
You know, you were an inspiration to me because, you know, Wednesday mornings at 7:30,
Oh, yeah.
I'd come to the research committee.
Yeah. Oh, sure. We needed you.
And so I had
Need a referee.
had a lot of respect for you and the committee, and I appreciated the opportunity to work with you on that.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we need the devotion to scholarly activity. We all do. All of us, for all reasons, but it's the life of the mind that counts.
This is Sarah Battison, and I'm honored to be here with Dr. Elston today. You have been a staunch supporter of the Summer Fellowship Program here at Gunderson. I know that ties in with your involvement with the research committee. Could you explain your thinking regarding the Summer Fellowship?
In brainstorming with Dr. Adolf Gunderson, in thinking about how to make the Gunderson Foundation and the clinic hospital at the same time have a mark in the world, I thought that it might be appropriate to focus on really enlarging our nurturing of young, bright folks who were in the middle of a college process, who had outstanding credentials, who were aiming toward a health science career. Not necessarily medicine, but nursing, pharmacy, other forms of medically related activity, microbiology. And that was the impetus for the focus on the students. We had a well-established postgraduate residency training program here, but nothing as a preamble to that. And I thought that would be where we might fit it in.
Would you share the story of the Elston Summer Fellow?
Oh, well, that was a surprise. Barry Alvarez came to be a speaker at a community event at which Dr. Alf Gunderson, myself, my wife, Virginia Gunderson, were seated around the table. And Mary said to Dr. Gunderson, "Did Van tell you about the computer that he bought?" And he said, "Yes." "And did he tell you?" "No." "Well, I bought a house." And to me. And that was kind of the beginning of the fun part of the foundation work for me. Dr. Gunderson was such a broad thinker. I tried to persuade him to become a progressive, but he wouldn't do that.
I know you've been a staunch supporter of the Gunderson Medical Foundation. But do you have a special role model in philanthropy, and what led you to support the foundation?
I'm trying to spend all my money before I'm dead. It's true.
I'll ask, what advice would you give if someone asked you about contributing to Gunderson Medical
I
Foundation?
haven't a clue. I support other things too. Universities, libraries, other significant events in the world, as well as the foundation. And my goal is to give it away before I'm gone, or if I can make it just right, it'll be zero. I didn't come here to work for money. I came for fun. I had a lot of fun. Lived simply, saved my pennies. Now it's time to give it away.
Your giving has been very personal over the years in terms of supporting research. Is that the only area that you've supported the foundation?
Well, the playground, a child's playground. We needed a green space for kids who were impaired in their ability to be fully active. And a big, busy clinic hospital has limited space for people who are old and lame or slow-moving, and children who are lame and slow-moving that need shelter and comfort and other than the body parts. So we've made an effort to honor a missing son with the playground effort.
And that's sort of exciting. It's under renovations now?
Oh, it is. It's wonderful. Every 10 years. I had my career redone every 10 years. Now you got to rebuild old houses. You got to redo playgrounds. Every 10 years, more or less. And so we're in the middle of a major redo as the building and the physical plant is constantly refreshed.
You refer to your 10-year plan or your approach. Could you talk about that, please?
Well, I don't think I could sit still for 10 years. I had to do something ultimately different, enough different to be still employable. But so I organized a pediatric intensive care for 10 years, worked at that. Did organized a pacemaker clinic for 10 years, did that. Research committee. So I have these 10-year lumps that I remember. Women have the birth of children and other landmarks in their lives, and those 10-year chunks are how I remember my participation here.
Would you have any advice for a young pediatrician joining Gunderson?
Don't vote for Governor Walker. No, I don't really. It's a wonderful place to work. The entire place. As director of research, I had a good time wandering the halls and getting to meet people out of my field. I met the building and grounds attendants, keepers, the shop guys, know them all by name, still know many of them that are still here, who are not the mainline clinicians, and knew them all pretty well. I like that. Made a special point of it.
Could you speak to how the clinic changed during your tenure, or how it may have changed or didn't change, or if there was?
Oh gosh, I was lucky. I retired before it really changed. I enjoy computers, I fool with them, I create them, I've made them, and did software, records keeping, and now it's all so different. Though I'm a good keyboardist, I'd be uneasy with the records now.
How many clinicians were there when you started versus when you ended?
Oh, I don't know, but I was number 61. That was, you got your number. Adolf Gunderson number 1 was 1, and so there were 60 others. But that was still growing. The clinic didn't have very many physicians, and that was a big number. Not now. I don't know what number it's in the hundreds, many hundreds. And it's very interesting. That's why you had to change every 10 years. If you didn't or couldn't adapt, you'd be gone. You couldn't stand it, or you couldn't be productive or interesting or take care of patients. I think it's such a dynamic thing. We introduced the first nurse practitioners in this corner of Wisconsin, in the clinic here, and in pediatrics actually, and then they sprouted elsewhere too. So that was a big change, integrating them into a clinical practice and making sure that they could do good work and had enough but not too much supervision, I guess.
What did teaching and interacting with residents bring to your practice?
Well, that's part of the game. That's the teacher leader. Who do we remember? Teachers, preachers, occasional medical men. And it inspired me, like my role model as a youth, of this Renaissance man who knew everything and spoke of everything, read everything. And I thought that would be a good model for me. I enjoyed it. Had Teacher of the Year a couple of times. And other things that showed my interest in youth. We fed them and watered them and looked after them occasionally.
In your opinion, what has the foundation's role been at Gunderson?
Gosh, I'm not the best person to answer that because I was just a participant in the edges of the foundation. And I tried to do what I could do to help it be more substantial. In the early days, we had to demonstrate that we did have some reason to be qualified as a 501c3, and that had to do with education and some not revenue-producing activity that was credible. And so that's really how I played a part. I don't think that the larger picture of the foundation was part of my view at the time. I view it differently now. I'm in hindsight, but at that time it was novel.
So how do you view it now?
Well, I think it's an important tool to serve the intellectual life of the institution in the large sense. Residents, students, visiting dignitaries, thinkers. Invite the Secretary of the Navy or somebody to come and be a talker.
The mission of the foundation being to support the education, research,
Yeah, well, it was research for me.
community, and the whole system. Would we have taught the next generation, or I'm just, you worked with that environment of having people train and of having the research.
Yeah. Well, it came from academic environments in which you had to publish once or twice a year or you're out. And it was, that's okay, that's a fair measure. In this setting you saw some patients, but there was more to the presence here than seeing patients. And it had to be in the form of either teaching, learning, or a combination of both. And how could that be done? Well, the foundation had done it with their residents and trainees for many years, and this research aspect broadened the field a bit and brought a little more intellectual life to the institution, I think. I hope so.
Now, you and Mary are being honored with the Founders Award this October, which, do you have reactions to that?
Well, I don't, because I haven't yet received the award. Of course, I'm surprised and pleased, but I think of others who earned it, and I'm not sure I would have chosen me or us, but we're honored, and we made our try at supporting the institution.
What advances in pediatric cardiology have you seen during your tenure?
Well, by specific name, intravascular intervention, that is tools at the end of a catheter to do something to the heart. Poke holes in it, or add wires, or block this or block that. Diagnostic ultrasound that gives complete, beautiful images of the interior of the heart while it's beating, and the possibility to surgically repair many of the defects that have been observed, and having a chance to do that. There have been, I think when I started there were about 200 children's cardiologists in this country. We all knew each other, trained with each other mostly. And there might be 1,000 now, but it's not a huge field, and we mostly know each other still. And remark on the change. Again, my life as a medical man is over. I'm on to other things. I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. I'm thinking about a degree in advanced math. I'm serious. I'm not pulling your leg. I think I could do it, but I have to do it elsewhere. Hard to do math by remote. You have to be in the presence of a challenging mind poking you. So I've thought about that. I just wait for the opportunity.
Speaking of challenging minds, talk to us about potato guns.
Oh, potato guns.
That came from Melinda, actually. That
Oh, yeah?
question. Oh, yes.
I'll be darned. Well,
Where did your fascination with potato guns come from, or start?
I borrowed a potato gun from somebody that used hairspray as its fuel. And I took it to one of our departmental picnic suppers in the country and blew my eyebrows off. Thought I can do better than this. I'm an inventor. So I now have a potato gun that's propane powered, fires with a barbecue lighter, and will shoot spuds about 1/4 mile. And I take it down to my Wisconsin River hideout home and shoot it over the river as the canoeists come by. Boom. Then I taught my granddaughters how to make tracers by taking light sticks, cutting them apart, and poke them in the potato and shoot them at night and fire them over the river. So then I made a couple of different sized barrels for a handful of rocks, a small onion,
Baby red.
baby
russet.
red, yeah, the works. You got your palette right there. A leftover avocado.
Why not? Why not?
They make a bigger bonk. You know what works well is a handful of rocks and a paper towel. And you fire it at the bushes and you get about 20 sparrows. I came here as an intern. I have been a radio amateur for 50 years. I put up my antenna on old Michael Erickson Hall and came in on the clinic's PA system. That was a stitch. So then I had to change my mode of action. Instead of talking, I'm a Morse code operator, and I like to do that. So they couldn't figure out what was going on when the PA system went boop, 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 boop. That was one of my fun things. I built a car, built a dune buggy, taught both of my daughters to sail competitively, did that for many years. Trailed the country, won silverware, had to build a mantle to put all the silverware on. And they grew up and left me. They wanted bigger water. Kathy, the older daughter, went to Alaska, and she and a woman friend got a boat, motorboat, and ran the Kuskokwim. You're permitted to take salmon as a year-round resident for your subsistence. And she and her friend would net a boat full of salmon. She was the only woman that the fellows would let run their boats up the river because it was full of rocks, like our Mississippi River wing dams, and she knew how to read the rocks. She then married a sailor and sailed around Alaska, Miami, Barbados, the East Coast, the Eagle, and that's where she is now. Our younger daughter then grew up, got tangled up in meteorology and math and oceanography, and now, of course, has to live by an ocean also. So we have no relatives left in the area. My brother's on the East Coast, cousins on the West Coast, South Coast. That's it. And you should say, I would ask this in interviews of young doctors, where would you like to be buried? And the answer is, well, I have a plot in the Lancaster, Wisconsin cemetery, just waiting, because my ancestors came to the southwest Wisconsin as pioneers, legislators, judges, congressmen, thieves, the works. The Gideon Bible in Boscobel, that hotel was run by one of my wife's great-grandfathers when the Gideons were there and decided to reduce the turmoil among the salesmen who traveled by their calming influence. So I have an attachment for southwest Wisconsin, the driftless area. It's beautiful here. It's one of the reasons that I came here in the early days after the call from Dr. Rasmus. It's gorgeous. It's so beautiful, so different.
And your wife Mary is a nurse.
She is a nurse and a dairy farmer. That was her career, and she got us through that in the early days. We were married as medical students, one of the few, and poor, and worked to feed ourselves pretty hard. I tell you the turkey story?
Mm-hmm.
Did I?
Please share it again.
Well, in medical school, one of the beloved pathologists said to me and to 3 other fellows, well, fellas, I have some university farms, good-sized turkeys, and I want their aortas, special body part, and if you can dissect them for me carefully, you can have the rest of the bird. So between the 4 of us, we had 100 turkeys. And that was food for 2 years. It was wonderful. You had to make allowances for inexperienced turkey pluckers, however. But the meat was wonderful.
And how long did you say that got you through in terms of?
Oh, it was 2 years. 2 years of turkey. And then catfish. I got a mudcat by hand. Chased it up behind a sandbar on the Wisconsin River. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a log, so I poked it with an oar. But it was this huge fish, about your size. And I thought, oh, this is trouble, because that's the sandbar. I'm in the deep water. He's right there. So I'll hit him again. And it only made him madder. Finally, I put a rope on the lock of the oar and pulled it through his gills, and then had him tied up. My brother and I have a witness, and we have a photo of this huge animal. And no fishing license, of course. I didn't intend to go fishing. So that was food for another 2 years for 2 families. That was a big fish. Then I quit fishing. I couldn't top that.
It represented mastery.
That's right.
Do you have any comments about the med ed program run by the foundation? Working with Dr. Overholt when he came?
Oh gosh, what a challenging job that was. No, I don't really.
Oh.
He was just a very charming man. I met Dr. Overholt before he came here. In a funny way, this is sort of what was behind my coming back here. I was at the University of Colorado in Denver, and some Army folks were gathering at some night spot, and they were recruiting this somewhat substantial medical person to come to the Middle West and be an academic leader. And I was there as a student or a resident, and we were just kind of freeloading and met this man. Gosh, he's a real heavyweight in the organization, planning, scheming, military structure. And why would he want to do that? Well, his friend was also Dr. Bob Rasmus, with whom he'd grown up. And he was in the process of evaluating coming to La Crosse to really beef up the medical residency training program. And he did, of course. I came several years later, not thinking that I would ever meet him again, but he certainly had a wide footprint on our institution, and a remarkable man. Not easy to get along with at times, but remarkable. He had a substantial, interesting knowledge base, aside from being a master clinician, which he was known for. He was also an expert in, as we call it, biological warfare. And I had been sent off for training during my military stuff to learn about how to distribute plague and anthrax and other sorts of things to people that we were not happy about. I'm glad I never had to see that through. But he knew a lot of that stuff and was the authority on it, for the most part, for the Army. Period. The whole Army, not... So he was a really interesting man.
What do you think brings people like that, and yourself, to La Crosse and to Gunderson? What's the draw?
Well, a very fine medical place in many respects. B, a beautiful physical space. River, geology, people interested in the outdoors. Canoeing, camping, biking, anything, skiing, the works. And a small, stable community. I shouldn't say small, but it's a modest community that is not so troubled as it was when I lived in Denver. I grew up in Detroit, lived in Baltimore. Those are good cities to be from.
You're our test run for this project, and how do you see the value of what we're doing? Is it something that we're not only, getting to hear your story, but to be able to share that and make Gunderson a living archive?
Well, I want you to get all the signatures of all these emeritus staff, physical signature, and record them somewhere. Among things that you record for posterity, I personally have made a challenging thing for myself to assemble all the signatures of all of my ancestors, many of whom are dead, just for curiosity's sake. It's inexpensive, it's history, and they're distinctive marks of the person. I think there are many things that you could reflect on in historical sense, that the foundation now is old enough to have a perspective on the town and the medical institutions, that those things are, I think, important to record, particularly while the people still can recite some of the interesting details. And you better do it soon, because we'll be gone.